All right, talk to me first about Bernie Sanders' comment about Joe Biden. He says, if you're Donald Trump and you got Joe Biden, Trump will eat his lunch. Is Bernie Sanders correct?
Bernie Sanders is in attack mode. He loves to do that. He's a very aggressive campaigner. He wants this campaign and he wants it aggressively. He can say that, but the polls don't indicate that. When you look at the polls in terms of how they are faring, not only in national polls, but specifically as it relates to battleground states, it seems like if you're comparing a tete-a-tete between Bernie and Trump and Biden and Trump, as it stands today, Biden seems to outperform Bernie. So I think it's pretty much wishful thinking on his part.
That's true. And by the way, I agree with you. I love when Bernie Sanders goes in attack mode. I wish all the Democrats would morph into that in the primary and start competing with each other a little bit.
I agree. Me too.
Hopefully the next debate that will happen. Do you believe that the polls that show Joe Biden versus Donald Trump show Joe Biden doing better in that hypothetical matchup than Bernie Sanders? Do you believe that's because President Trump hasn't yet ramped up attacks on either of the two figures, much more than just commenting now and again or a particular tweet? He hasn't launched a concerted effort yet against any of the Democrat presidential candidates.
That's true. He hasn't. And what you mentioned a second ago in terms of wanting to see the actual Democratic candidates be more aggressive in their sort of modes of attack, even right now in the primary season, I think is very important. Because we all know that when President Trump becomes fully engaged in election mode, it's going to be attack mode. And I believe that one of the ways in which Democratic voters need to be judging their potential candidates is how well that candidate can both deal with attacks and project attacks. And so you're right. The fact that Trump hasn't yet attacked any one candidate in a projected way, I think really isn't showing us how those candidates would really fare with him going head-to-head come election season.
Right, because we know that some attacks or some weaknesses in certain campaigns and candidates, that ends up being lethal to the campaign. And I think if I were a Democratic voter, I'd want to make sure that all the attacks on my candidate had already happened. There was nothing new that could come because then you'd know whether that candidate had staying power. So my next question goes back to Bernie Sanders and the private jet. I think he might be right about the Joe Biden. I think Trump would eat his lunch, but I think Bernie Sanders has a lot of weaknesses that he's not admitting, and this seems to be a pretty serious one. I mean, this is the man that wants the Green New Deal. This is the man that says he wants to abolish billionaires. He's talking constantly about carbon emissions. He's telling us that we have a climate crisis. These are all his words, not mine. And yet he's going to truck back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with a private plane between his campaign and the Senate impeachment trial. Is he just making a target of himself?
He can definitely be critiqued from that very, very heavily. You're exactly right. Now, of course, he would say, hey, this impeachment trial will not go on forever. It's required that he's there, that he's engaged, that he takes part in that. But he also doesn't want to lose momentum on the campaign trail. And so he's merely doing it for a finite period of time in order to be able to quickly get from point A to point B during the election season. But it definitely would open him up to attack. And it's politics. All is fair game.